Donc, merci à tout le monde. Merci d'être avec nous pour ce premier événement en ligne du projet européen MultitraiNMT. Je vais donner la parole à Dorothy qui va dire quelques mots d'introduction, puis faire une présentation de l'ouvrage qu'elle est en train de finaliser. Puis Juan Antonio va nous présenter les activités développées dans le cadre du projet. Et enfin, Rema présentera la plateforme MutNMT. Le temps d'échange que nous vous proposons en deuxième partie de matinée se fera dans des salles avec la répartition aléatoire qui est faite par Zoom, mais nous veillerons à avoir une personne du projet dans chaque salle. On fera au mieux pour cet échange de pratiques. Et je laisse la parole à Dorothy.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can see my screen. If you can't, I'm sure somebody will tell me.
That's fine.
So, yeah, good. Okay, thank you. So I'm delighted to introduce the project MultitraiNMT to you this morning. I think the best place to start is with the challenge that we all found ourselves facing this time last year, or this time 5 years ago, rather. And it kind of mirrors the challenge I'm facing now, where I can't get to my next slide. I've just done it. Okay, so about 5 years ago, we were faced with a new challenge called neural machine translation. It was a challenge because it was a new technology in some ways. And when we have new technologies as teachers, that demands new expertise from us and from our learners. But it was particularly challenging this time around because the technology was one that was seen as rather opaque. So a lot has been said about the opacity of neural machine translation, but I think Jen Burrell's reflections on opacity in general are quite useful. And she talks about intentional opacity, where maybe a software producer produces something inscrutable, proprietary software that you can't really look inside. That's not the case with us. Machine translation in general is characterized by the availability of open source software sharing, etc., in the machine translation community. But in our community of translation teachers and learners, we can sometimes suffer from technical illiteracy, which causes opacity as well. In other words, we just don't understand this particular technology. Again, this is a problem that we can overcome. We've done this before. Technologies keep changing, and translators and translator trainers are actually very good at integrating new technologies. So this is something we can overcome. What's even more difficult, though, is what she calls machine learning inherent opacity, the kind of difficulty you face because the technology itself is complex and it operates at such a scale that it is difficult to grasp. So this is a tricky technology that we're facing now. It also brings with it some challenges to do with sustainability. So, for example, we know by now that the technologies that we use to do free online machine translation come at a cost to the environment. So a huge amount of energy is used up in kind of online translation, a huge amount of processing power. There's also the problem of sustainability of the profession. So, for example, once a university president hears, oh, machine translation is supposed to be working at human parity now, he or she wonders, why are we teaching courses in translation then? We also face the problem where new entrants might be reluctant to get into a profession where they think machines are going to dominate. from a teaching point of view, and a technological point of view in general, there's also the challenge that comes with machine translation being a technology that's used not just by professional translators, but also by the general public, by citizens in society, language learners, etc. And each of these groups, each of these constituencies has different expectations of machine translation and maybe also different needs when it comes to learning about the technology. And then we have all the learning contexts in which we might address machine translation. So, for example, we have university programs with full modules, secondary schools, maybe even primary schools will encounter machine translation when students are learning a second language. And of course, workplaces, whether they're professional translating workplaces or other workplaces, will also have learning needs that have to do with machine translation. And we've lots of different modes like online and face-to-face, synchronous and asynchronous, that we need to be able to cope with in our teaching. And we need to be able to help people integrate both technical and non-technical information. So there is a lot that would be helpful for certain people to know about how the technology works. And there's also a lot that would be helpful for people to know about what impact the current use of the technology can have on certain practices, such as language learning, for example. In this group that we're in, we are also very committed to the idea that learning should be situated, it should be as realistic as possible, that it has to integrate the artifacts that a professional would work with if we're training translators, for example. And this poses certain challenges as well. So how do you create the environment in which people will learn what they need to learn? And of course, if I haven't already touched upon it, there is a bigger picture. Current machine translation is a nice instantiation of machine learning, and machine learning and all of its applications have huge consequences for society. And we're familiar, or a lot of people are familiar with these consequences when it comes to the manipulation of news or the use of personal data from social media platforms, for example. But they mightn't think of the issues that arise when one unthinkingly uses online machine translation. You might not be aware of the hidden biases, for example. And of course, there is potential for machine translation to disrupt language learning, but there's also the potential for it to support language learning and to support multilingual institutions, multilingual societies, polyglot individuals. So there's a lot of good potential that we would like people to know about. Okay, so what's our solution to these huge challenges? Well, a group of us got together, and I'll introduce the team in just a moment, to develop, evaluate and disseminate open access materials that we hope will lead to the enhancement of teaching and learning about machine translation among all of these different constituencies. So language learners, language teachers, trainee translators, translation teachers, and professional translators. And we really do want to focus on both the technical and the critical, ethical kind of competences that learners need in order to use this technology to their advantage and to a kind of societal advantage, but also to give them an entree into machine learning, if you like, to help them function better as technologically competent, informed citizens. So this is the team. It's led by Olga Torres-Hostench from UAB in Barcelona, whose energy we all just marvel at. Olga is joined at UAB by Pilar Sanchez Gijon. From UGA, we have Caroline Rossi, whom you've already heard. We have a team at Dublin City University, where I'm based. So there's me, Joss Morkins, Sharon O'Brien. We're also privileged to have 2 enterprises involved in this project. So MultitraiNMT, also based in Dublin, with Ricardo Superbo doing a superb job, and PROMCIT, represented by Gemma Ramirez Sanchez, who'll also speak this morning or this evening, or depending on where you are. From the University of Alicante, we have Juan Antonio Perez Ortiz and Miquel Forcada, both of whom are very well known in machine translation circles. It has to be said that the project has its roots in some ways in a project that started with Caroline Rossi, me, and Olga, and was supported by our various embassies, in particular through a program called the Ulysses program, which is administered by the Irish Research Council and Campus France. So, merci. Of course, the project that we're reporting on this morning is funded by a bigger program. It's a strategic partnership funded by the Erasmus Plus program of the European Union. So there are a lot of things we are attempting to do, but our main deliverables that we'll talk about this morning are an open access textbook, accompanying learning activities, and a pedagogical interface for neural machine translation training, evaluation, and use. So just to say something very quick about the open access textbook, it's a book that is in its very final stages of preparation before going, hopefully, to review. It's composed of 8 chapters plus an introduction. So the 8 chapters look at the following topics. The first is multilingualism. So in this chapter, Olga Torres-Hostench puts the case for multilingualism and sets the scene for the rest of the book, if you like. You are probably aware, being in this industry, or certainly if you're in the English-speaking world, that the very need for individuals to speak more than one language is sometimes questioned by policy makers in the light of, for example, extensive use of English, but also the presence of quite highly functioning machine translation. So a case still needs to be made for multilingualism and how perhaps machine translation can support it rather than undermine it. Then, of course, we need to introduce machine translation to an audience who might have either false ideas about translation in general, or just not have thought a lot about the area before. So they use the technology, but they haven't given it much thought. And so this would be an introduction that could be used by people who don't have hugely technical requirements. And then we get into chapters that would help you to actually implement machine translation in a more sophisticated or informed way than before. So we have chapters on, how to choose the right MT system for you. And this is, of course, based on the evaluation of machine translation quality, amongst other things. We also have a chapter on preparing texts for machine translation, which is an interesting topic, given that when the technologies change, what helps the technology may also change. And that chapter is by Pilar Sanchez-Gijon. Sharon O'Brien has written a chapter on dealing with post-editing mistakes, or with machine translation mistakes, rather. So this is essentially a chapter on post-editing. Again, it's very accessible and also critical. So it takes quite a critical stance on some of the received wisdom about post-editing. We hope you'll find that interesting. Joss Morkins tackles big questions about machine translation and ethics. And these span from the kind of issues that arise when we use any kind of computer system, issues to do with privacy, data protection, etc., but also issues to do with machines as ethical agents. So it's very much in the up to date, if you like. Chapter 7, which I have circulated a link to, and if you haven't received it, you might get in touch, is on how neural machine translation works. So this chapter, it's still pedagogically oriented in that it still gives us accessible ways of thinking about neural machine translation, metaphors to help us understand, but it takes it further, breaking down the individual steps and maybe informing us a bit more about the actual technical detail. And then finally, Gemma's chapter looks at customizable neural machine translation and explains the steps one needs to take to get a system that works for one's own purposes. Again, this is written in very accessible terms so that you begin to understand how these systems can be seen as learners, which is very consistent, again, with the machine learning backdrop. So, as I said, there is a sample chapter that has already been circulated, and if you don't have this URL, here it is now, you can go get it. You can also look at our website, although you'll hear more about the project in just a couple of minutes.
So hello everyone, I'm Juan Antonio from University of Alicante in Spain, and I will make a brief introduction to another of the elements in our proposal, which are training exercises. So unlike the book, this is expected to be released by the end of the year or so. So this is a work in progress, so we will devote most of this year to prepare a number of different activities that can be used by students or instructors around the world that want to use the textbook in their classes. So this is like a support we give them so that they can already provide some assessment activities and they don't have to prepare them from scratch. So we have decided to prepare a couple of different exercises, and on the one hand we will have short questions, short in length but also in the time that they require to be answered. So the idea is that these questions are intended for self-assessment by the students, so they can use them in order to get some idea about how well they have, they know all the different concepts and ideas in the textbook. And on the other hand, we will have also more reflexive activities, in the sense that they will require students to think not for a couple of minutes or so, but to devote some time to connect concepts and probably go beyond what is already contained in the textbook. So these activities are supposed to be teacher guided, because in principle a student won't have enough resources to do them on their own. So in order to prepare these activities, after considering many different alternatives, we decided to go with H5P, which is a platform. I will show you some example in a minute. So H5P is an open source platform that can be used to prepare nice interactive activities. So this is the URL, h5p.org, and some of the basic elements in this framework is that it's, how to say that, multi-platform or something like that. So it can be used by installing a plugin, or in some cases the plugin is already built in different platforms, such as Moodle, for example, WordPress, Drupal, and a few others. And you have plenty different types of exercises that you can prepare. I will show you. I have chosen a number of 4 or 5 exercises to show you, and they cover some of the different types of exercises that you can prepare, such as fill in the blanks or crosswords or drag words around in order to fill some holes in a sentence, or obviously multiple choice and the basic, the classical ones, essays for the students. This is intended especially for the long activities, which are supposed to be teacher guided. They are reusable, so anyone can download them and upload them to their own platform. So for example, if you have your course on Moodle and you want to benefit from these activities, you can download those of your interest and upload them to your private course space in Moodle, right? In this case, activities will benefit, or your Moodle will benefit from integration, in the sense that the results of the students, for example, when they do the activities, can be integrated into the regular scoring or grading system in Moodle, for example. And well, H5P has a company behind. So in fact, they provide some paid services, but in our case, everything will be open source, open access, and so on, right? So our contents will be released. Each activity will have a Creative Commons license, but the company will, in the coming months, will presumably release a content hub, which is quite interesting because in principle it hasn't been released yet. It's in beta stage, but in principle everyone would be allowed to upload their activities to this great large hub, and everyone will be able to search for interesting activities and download them. So we are waiting for the content hub to be released, but in principle we think it would be a good platform to have our activities available for everyone. In the meantime, we will be preparing a WordPress site in which you can access the one I will show you in a minute, in which you can see the activities and download them. And every activity includes some metadata that informs instructors about the difficulty level, if the text requires some adaptation because it has some language-specific content, and it will give some hints about how to translate this into how to translate the activity into another language, which things you have to take into account because the sentence should contain some whatever, right? So, okay, let's go with with a website in which I have included, again, a few sample activities. So the idea is to have around a few 100, 200 activities or something like that. But in principle, I'm showing you 4 or 5 of them. So I copy the link, okay, on the chat as well. This is tiny URL, .com/NMT for neural machine translation, okay, activities. So this is it. So this is my, okay, this is it. So here you have a few sample activities. And on the first one is drag and drop. So you in this case, probably, I'm not sure about your level of expertise in neural machine translation. So this is a good time probably to recommend you if you want to know about the inner workings of NMT, of how it works, that you read the preprint version of chapter 7. So probably after reading that chapter, you will be able to answer this question, for example, successfully. So in this case, it introduces the student. After reading this section, think twice about this and that, and then drag the words into the correct boxes. So think about the analogies. So in this case, let me see, it's like Paris, for example, minus Morocco, for example, in this case, I probably should go here, Paris, you subtract France, and so on, right? So this is connected to the idea of embeddings that is completely described on that. So you click on verify. In this case, I'm missing most of the answers, right? And then you can try again, you show you the solution. So you can see here how this is quite nice. So it's quite interactive. And we consider that this introduces an additional value in the activities, in the sense that they are funny to be done, right? So it's not just a boring text, but students can try drag and drop and then see how good they are doing. This can, obviously, you can turn this on and off in case you don't want the student to know that. So notice here, I assume, for example, that I'm interested in that. So I can click on reuse here, and then I can download it as an H5P file. So I download this file into my computer, and then I can upload it into Moodle, for example, right? So Moodle already provides support for this, but there is also a plugin that you can install if you want some extra functionalities. So it's as easy as that. In the future, if the Content Hub is available, then you will not have to download the activity. You simply will go to the hub and search for neural machine translation. I don't know if there will be some label or something, but you will be able to find the interest in the activities of your interest, and in just one click incorporate them into your courses. But for now, downloading and uploading is also quite simple. Okay, so another one, this is just an example of the open answer question, in the sense that it's making some, what this is about, consider the encoder. Okay, encoder, decoder, again, is something related to neural machine translation, right? So this is the kind of activity, in this case, that will have some support for instructors in order about how to adapt this to their own language. For example, in this case, it's a Harry Potter sentence. Harry Potter rolled over inside his blankets without waking up. And then it asks the student to make a graphical representation of the embeddings, right? So if you want to translate this, or you want to use this into your own language, probably the sentence will not be useful because of the relationship between words and things like that, right? So there is, I will show you later the instructions for teachers. So probably you need some help in order to, okay, the sentence in my language, can it be that simply the translation of this Harry Potter sentence, or has to be some verbs or some particular aspects that make the rest of the question to have some sense, right? And here you have another one. This was prepared by Olga, just because you can have images there. So in this case, you have to drag and drop languages. So like Upper Sorbian, for example, to the region they are spoken, and then you can verify, okay, 1 in 5 in this case. This is in Catalan. We have still to work in this. Remember that this is a preliminary version of the activities, right? So because everything can be translated, so the H5P framework already provides support for having the activities in different languages. So it would be, everyone could translate them, and if the Content Hub is available, upload the activities so that everyone can benefit from the translation. This is a classical one, right? So we will also have this kind, not everything will be funny and fireworks and things like that, right? So in this case, it's BLEU is an automatic metric that gives low scores, no really correlates, no usually correlates, okay, somehow with human judgment, right? Okay, I did it. And we have also funny things like this. So this is, in this case, you have to find relevant vocabulary terminology about neural networks according to chapter 7 of the book. And then I don't know where they are. It's supposed to be something. I don't remember where I put, because I wrote this and I don't know, there are like 3 or 4 words around there, right? So you select them and then finally, and then you check if you did it or okay. And okay, and this is another one, right? This is a quite complex one, in fact. In this case, you have to, it's similar to the previous one. You have to drag and drop the words into the correct places. So we have already a bunch of activities covering most of the different chapters, but as chapter 7 was the one that has been released as a preprint, so I wanted to emphasize the activities corresponding to chapter 7, right? But obviously there will be activities covering all the different chapters in the book. And finally, so this is my dashboard as an administrator of the WordPress site, but I just wanted you to see as an editor, not as a student, I can always edit an activity, okay? And then here you have how H5P allows us to put all the different things related to the activity. And there is also a metadata section in which you can find the license. Again, it will be attribution, Creative Commons, and then here in additional information, you have the metadata indicating the difficulty, if the student will require a teacher to guide them or not, and some, again, comments for instructors. In this case, it's just a small draft. But so translate the words to the target language or find similar words, whatever, right? So it gives the instructor some students about how to adapt this into a different language, or how to cope with this, because it may be the case that the instructor, again, because, for example, in chapter 7, which is quite technical, although, again, as Dorothy said, we've been trying to metaphorically introduce everything. But it could be the case that some teachers even don't know about the correct answer, or how this is supposed to, or what the students are.
That just a few words to say that I was taught machine translation when I was at the translation degree, and some of my background comes from Juan Antonio. And then I became an MT maker myself. And then I decided with some colleagues to run a company that has been delivering MT for business purposes for many years. And now I was participating in this exciting project, and I need to think it from the point of view of teaching machine translation. So this means that I'm old. First of all, and that I needed to change my mind completely because I had the full fun. I had to write chapter 8 of the book about custom machine translation. I'm struggling with making activities that are as interesting as my colleagues want, because I'm not a teacher, so this is quite a challenge for me. And where I feel comfortable and when I think that we could integrate most of the feedback of the partners and add our own, let's say, prompted way of doing things, is with MutNMT. Because, you know, by putting your hands on something, you empower yourself. When you understand it by doing, you can empower other people. And the whole point about thinking about a tool in which people can make machine translation or learn machine translation by doing it, the whole point is to empower them to make present and future translators think about this as a job, maybe, or to take informed decisions when they are faced to the output of a system, or they have to choose between one or another. So this is the whole point. So we are aiming at empowering language people, let's say, in general, because you will see that unlikely with some of the activities that might be not funny or fireworks, with MutNMT, everything will be funny and fireworks, and that you will have a great time. So let's see what we have in here. I was given 20 minutes. If I'm too long, please raise your hand, because as you see, I like a lot speaking. So let's see, MutNMT, learn NMT by doing. That's a nice slogan. Let's see what will we find. What are the basics for which we conceived this tool? So it is an online educational tool to approach neural machine translation by doing. So neural machine translation. We've been, as Dorothy was saying, experimenting technology changes, and now is the time for neural machine translation. So that was one of the decisions. And this is one of the technologies we were not funding materials, not even basic materials for, so we decided to go only neural machine translation with this platform. So what will MutNMT allow you? It will allow you to get a sense of working with data, so managing data, which is the basics of how neural machine translation learns. It will allow training 1 hour neural machine translation engines, for which you can select your own corpora and tweak the parameters. We will see what it means later. We will be able to inspect how neural machine translation works. You will be able to inspect the training logs, the translation process itself. We will be for sure able to test our own engines by translating short text and documents and transforming them to translation memories, for example. We will be able to compare the output of different engines that are inside the platform, and to evaluate using automatic metrics the output of neural machine translation. There's also a not so funny a thing about managing users, servers, and processes, but this is also a very powerful tool, because you will see that we have different profiles, that if you want to have your own instance of MutNMT in your own institution, it is possible, but you will need to worry a bit about what assets you have and who's doing what. You will have the full power to stop a training and schedule what people are doing inside MutNMT. So good news, it was conceived as free software. So the code is already available in GitHub. This platform is now at a mature status. So we consider it done. So we could already release the code. We've been partnering with another project, which is called MultitraiNMT, which is, provides an educational neural NMT framework, so that we're not working on that part. We use MultitraiNMT, and we particularly use a neural machine translation architecture called Transformer. You need to read Juanan's book to know what it is. This is it's very well explained there. And then, as I was saying, you can have your own instance of MutNMT installed at your premises. And probably, as far as this project is concerned, we can still make little changes, but this doesn't mean that we cannot do further or deeper changes in the framework of other projects. So this is open to enhancement, further improvements, and so on. So that was a lot of text. Welcome to the home to MutNMT. This is the landing page, and let me tell you a little bit about why do we choose this name. So who is Mut? Wikipedia, which knows everything, tells us that Mut is the mother goddess, a mother goddess worshipped in ancient Egypt, and her name literally means mother. So we thought that that was a great name, because MutNMT is going to be the mother of NMT for most of us and most of the people that is going to use it. So you will find there things like baby engines and people that will become interested in NMT, and Mut will always has a place for them. You can access the platform easily. Yes, you just need to have a Google account, and then you're in. Oh. Then you have 7 different aspects or sections to work on. And of course, Mut had descendants, and one of the descendants is Neil, which will be helping you at every section of the tool to get started, and sometimes to explain the most, let's say, exciting sections, or the ones that carry the most information, let's say. So Neil will be there when you ask her for help, and then you're fine and you don't want to know anymore, you can say, okay, Neil, now I'm gonna work. So we conceived it to have beginners, experts, and admins. So there are different profiles defined. We didn't want to overwhelm people with, for example, training engines. So there are beginners that can use most of the things that are available, but cannot, for example, let's say, upload new Corpora or train new engines. This is also because of limits that you will find if you have your own instances. You need GPUs, and you need people to, you need this space. So somehow we needed to have this kind of user that can do many things, but not everything. Then you have experts, for example, imagine master's thesis students. They can use all the power of MutNMT, but cannot manage it. So that's the second level of expertise. And then as admins, you will be superpower users who can do everything and see if the server has any trouble, or if you have to upgrade a user to from beginner to expert, and so on. And you will see next to your name when you enter the tool, which profile you are entering with. Everyone enters as a beginner, and it needs to be promoted to expert or admin by an admin, indeed. So 7 sections. Let's go a little bit into them. There are many things to explain. I'll try to be concise and give you the highlights. I will show you it from the point of view of an admin, which is basically the same as an expert, to show you the full potential. So we need Corpora, parallel Corpora, to train neural machine translation. And this is the idea we want to transfer to people getting their hands into it. So that you need Corpora, and not a little amount of it, but quite a big amount of parallel Corpora to let neural machine translation learn from them. So this section is about uploading Corpora and managing a little bit what this means, so the right format and alignments between sentences, and also things like sizes. When we work with with black screens, as we used to work, we are not so much worried, but when you need to upload something from a browser, you are limited. But we are also limited, and so you need to know where are the limits, for example, for file sizes, and the different formats in which you can have source sentences in one document and target sentences in another document, or everything in the same document. So we've been providing, we will provide, or we are providing templates for people to know what do they need to do. And there's also a library, so that in which you will have your Corpora and also share Corpora, let's say. So this is the Corpora view. Once you have uploaded it, as you will see, you have public Corpora and your Corpora. The information is the same for both of them. So you will have information about which languages they cover, the amount of sentences, words, and information about the domain. When you uploaded them, you will be able to preview, download, or grab them if you are taking from public Corpora to your Corpora. As this is how you can make use of public Corpora, by grabbing them. Then there's also the engines. So once your models are built, they turn into engines. And there's a section for your engines and also public engines that people can share. So even if you are a beginner, there will be public engines and public Corpora that you can inspect and see and work with. This is the idea. Engines, the same here. We just list them and give a little bit of information at the beginning, and then we provide the full training log. We will see what it means a little later. You can download the models, because we said we are based on Joey NMT and on a transformer architecture. So so we can share the models with other people. You can download the Corpora that were used to train a particular engine, but you can remove the engine if you don't like it. We are also providing some other information that will become handy when you have lots and lots and lots of engines to understand what the differences are. So then we have the training section. So here, having your Corpora, in having uploaded Corpora or using Corpora that are available as public Corpora, you can set up your own training. So there's this was one of the most challenging interfaces we had to build, because in here you have the power to tweak the way the model will behave during training or during the learning process by tweaking the parameters that are along with some details in the upper part of the screen. Then you will need to decide, and your decision will make things, will make the whole difference between one engine or the other. You will need to decide how to split your corpora, or which corpora to use as training corpus, validation corpus, and test corpus. This is something that is explained in the book, and that will become handy. And you have a corpora selector here. Once you decide which is your source and target language, all your corpora that match those appear, and then you need to decide how many sentences you upload for each of the 3 types of corpora that are needed to train. And then here, hidden, you have the start training button. What happens next is that you start seeing how does the system train for an hour, leave. You can see, you can always have the information about the engine settings. So did I set beam size or batch size to this or that number? Did I use the right corpora? So as to stop your engine if you are not very confident about your choices. And you start seeing here engine stats that are changing as the system trains, right? This is at the end of 22 minutes of training. I stop a system, it says here stopped, and I can see already how is it going. So what is, for example, the blue score that I'm having, perplexity, how many light bulbs or C3PO droids I consume for these 22 minutes of training. And I can pass the test set to see if I'm happy with already with how the system is going. Oh, okay. So in the same screen, but at the bottom, you can see how we plot some of the progress during training for some of the metrics that the system uses to make decisions on whether keep on training or stop, or how is the learning process going, and the full log for each tiny step in the terms of epochs, steps. I know that this can be a little bit difficult now if you are not familiar with neural machine translation, but this is going live during the 1 hour training, so you can see how is it going. And once you become familiar, you can see if this is going better than your previous training. And this is what you will have in your training log in the engines library, as I was mentioning earlier. This is very powerful to teach about the many things that are let's say in the background of when you're training a system. there's a lot of terminology, a lot of things to understand, a lot of things to be careful about. And once you get them and you see one of these plotted graphs, you understand what's happening and why, for example, using the same corpus as training, dev, or validation and test, it's awful, and or what happens if you change your validation set to another one and you keep the other two, or what happens if you change one of the parameters. So this is the exciting things that you will be able to see live. So we provide 1 hour training, but we are always able to resume, and you will go for another hour. But let me tell you that we were surprised only with 1 hour training what you can already achieve. And you can see that in the translate section. In the translate section, this is no fireworks. This is a very simple, and so it's a translation tool that, like many of the others that we have seen, but this is for your own engines. In here, you can choose and also concatenate with this plus symbol the engines you've been training, or the ones that are already provided as public engines. And you can see, you can translate short text, or you can translate documents in different file formats. You can see how are they doing when you translate a sentence. So not the inner part, but what are they doing? So this is a translation that was produced by a system that was trained for 1 hour. We need to find a solution for the current situation, translated into French as il est nécessaire de trouver une solution pour la situation actuelle. I was amazed when I saw this translation, which is, for me, the technology has this effect. And I hope that we will be able to transfer this excitement also when you start touching the tool and seeing your own results. As a bonus, you can make a translation memory in TMX format out of either the documents you translated or the sentences you are translating here in the text box. And you can upload them to a CAT tool, let's say, or maybe give them any other use. But also from the eye's point of view, to what is happening inside the translation system when it is a translation time, not a training time, we are providing an inspect section that tells you for a sentence what is the pre-processing. So this is sentences. This is a very important day for human rights, and I chose one of my systems, one of my engines from English to Spanish, so I can see how the sentence goes pre-processed. We talk about this in the book, so about chopping and tokenization and casing and everything else, so you can have a hint on what is going on with the sentence you input. You can see that neural machine translation is hesitant. It doesn't have just one candidate translation, but a thing called the M-best candidates that are considered during the translation time. And you can see the output also before it is fully, it fully becomes the final output. So you can also see what is going on here. You can also compare among your, you can also compare your own systems, so just the output. So you input a sentence and you choose to compare this English-French to other English-French systems that you have available inside MutNMT. So you can see that they produce different translations. So this is also very interesting because it's not only that you tweak the parameters and that you have a blue score, but you can see with your own eye what the systems are doing and the differences based on the decisions you made previously. And finally, we have a section to evaluate by automatic metrics the output of neural machine translation. In here, you need to already provide files which have the original file split by sentences, then the machine translated file with the same amount of sentences matching the original, and then the reference translation, hopefully made by a professional translator or maybe made by another system so that you can compare them. You can provide more than one, but we will compute not multi-reference, but metrics from one machine translation output to one reference. If you input two, that one machine translation to the second reference. And we will provide some of the, let's say, state-of-the-art metrics used now in the field, like BLEU, character F3, and TER. And we also provide info for TTR. So that would be info at the document level, but then you can have a view of what's going on with the sentences individually. So you can have a look at this graph and say, oh, sentence 33, it's very odd. And you can go and inspect it. So you can select which sentence you want to inspect and see what's the source, what's the empty output, and what's the reference, what are the metrics, and what's going on. So we decided, because most of the metrics provide a number at document level, but what happens inside is that it's adding the numbers of individual sentences. So we wanted to provide this information also to final users. And finally, this very handy section about administrating MutNMT for people that need to admin it, so that need to make some user profile management, see which engines are now at the training process, which of the GPUs are in use and which are free, and what it's a little bit going on with them. Oh. So we encourage you to yourself meet MutNMT and Neil. That will make a whole tour on what things mean. For example, most of the terminology is already explained in the screen. And we hope that you will find it as exciting as we did when we were thinking about it and developing it. We know that it's already very powerful and there are many things to do, but there are also things that are limited. So remember that this is an educational tool and is for educational purposes, although it seems for professional purposes. Sizes for Corpora are limited, parameter tweaking is limited to the setting. So if we limit the Corpora, we need more or less in which range the parameters need to be. So we don't let you decide any number of the parameter, but we give you options. Training availability is limited, and so is time, because GPUs are needed and we need to be aware of that. Evaluation scenarios are limited. For example, we don't have post-edition oriented evaluation. We expect Corpora to be already aligned, so there's no support at low level to build corpora, so to align sentences or documents, or to clean them or to split them. The starting point is already, the corpora are already there, and there are many, many places in which you can find corpora. And of course, you will find your own needs, and we are happy to hear you.